Welcome back, everyone, for our sixth deep dive into discussing singlehood. Wow, episode 6 already.
It
It
is.
feels like we just got started exploring this whole ever-changing world of singlehood.
Time sure does fly when you're breaking down these societal norms
That
early.
really does. And speaking of norms, today we're gonna really do a deep dive into how some of the systems that are supposed to, you know, treat everyone equally.
Mm.
Well, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're gonna look at that when it comes to being single.
Yeah, and it's almost like a paradox. I mean, we've made these great strides in areas like marriage equality,
Right.
which is amazing, but maybe in doing so we've sort of accidentally reinforced this idea that marriage is like the ultimate goal.
That's the gold standard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So let's break this down a little bit. We're looking at this article, and it's really interesting. It's called "Single Equality in the Age of Marriage Equality,"
Okay.
and it's by Chao-ju, and it's published in Icon. And one of the things that they talk about is this really powerful term, marital supremacy.
Yeah. It's almost like marriage is like this key that unlocks all these extra perks and privileges in society.
Right.
You get tax breaks, inheritance laws. Everything just seems to favor married couples. And it leaves single people sometimes feeling like they're playing life on hard mode.
Yeah, like those family and friends discounts.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you have to be part of a couple to get the discount.
Exactly.
And if you're single, you're not part of a family.
Right. It's like they're saying you're not a real family. You're not worthy of these savings.
Right.
And it kind of just reinforces this whole idea that you're not whole until you're part of a couple. And it's not just about those, tangible benefits either.
Right.
Even the language that's used by like big institutions like the Supreme Court when they talk about marriage, sometimes even when they're trying to celebrate it, it kind of further puts it up on this pedestal.
Like in the Obergefell case.
Yeah.
The one that legalized same-sex marriage, I mean, that was obviously this huge, victory for equality. But some of the language that they used, even though it was well-intentioned, it almost felt like it was making marriage this ultimate achievement.
Yeah, it's like marriage is the only way to be truly happy or fulfilled.
Right.
And we see this in other places too, like Taiwan's constitutional court.
Oh, really?
They used very similar language when they made their decision about same-sex marriage too. It's like this idea is all over the world.
It makes you wonder what message that sends to people who are single.
Yeah.
Is it like saying that you're not good enough until you're married?
Exactly. Like you haven't quite arrived yet until you have that ring on your finger.
Yeah, like your life isn't complete.
Yeah, and that's where Chen brings up this idea of single equality. It's not saying marriage is bad or anything like that.
Right.
But it's about making sure that being single doesn't mean you're automatically at a disadvantage.
Right.
It's about, recognizing and trying to break down all those systemic biases that make it harder for people who aren't married.
It's like trying to level the playing field.
Exactly. Just making sure everyone has a fair shot no matter what their relationship status is.
Yeah.
And it really challenges this whole idea that you need to be married to be a full citizen or to have a good life.
And Chen specifically focuses on one group in particular, single women without children.
Right. SWOC, as they're often called.
Yeah.
And this is where things get even more complicated.
Right.
Because they face like a double disadvantage.
Right.
For not being married and for not having kids. It's like they're carrying around this invisible weight on their shoulders everywhere they go.
Okay, so like imagine for a second I'm a single woman and I don't have kids.
Correct.
What are some like specific examples of how I might experience this disadvantage?
Well, think about like taxes, for example. A lot of times, single women without children end up paying more in taxes than married couples, even if they earn the same amount of money.
Wow.
It's a system that can really feel like it's stacked against them.
Yeah, and it's not just taxes, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about workplaces that have, really great family leave policies.
Yeah.
But those policies are usually designed for parents.
Right.
So if you're single, even if you're taking care of an elderly parent or relative or something,
Yeah.
you might not be able to get those same benefits.
Right. Like your needs just don't matter as much.
Yeah. Like you're not contributing as much to society.
Yeah. Like you're constantly having to prove your worth.
So this marital supremacy that we've been talking about, it's like, it's everywhere. It's in our laws. It's in our social structures. It's like, it's built into the system. So if it's that deeply embedded, what can we actually do about it? Chen does call for some pretty big changes, both legally and societally.
Yeah, they do. I mean, we have to really confront these biases head on. And that means taking a hard look at our laws and policies. Are tax codes fair to everyone?
Right.
Are Social Security benefits structured in a way that makes sense for today's world?
Why?
And are workplace policies accidentally penalizing single people?
Yeah.
These are big questions.
That sounds like a huge undertaking.
Yeah, it is. It is a huge undertaking. But, you got to start somewhere, right? And I think asking these questions is a good place to start.
Right.
And it's not just about, like, changing the laws either. I think we really need to rethink some of these basic assumptions that we have about singlehood.
Okay.
Like, Social Security, for example.
Yeah.
It's still kind of based on this old-fashioned model of, the husband goes to work and the wife stays home.
Right.
But, like, what about all those single people who have worked their whole lives and paid into the system?
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be, getting something back?
Right. It's like they're contributing just as much.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that people contribute to society in all sorts of ways, no matter what their relationship status is.
Right.
And the system should reflect that,
Yeah. So we've got the legal and policy stuff.
Uh-huh.
But you also mentioned societal changes. Like, what does that look like? Like, how do we change people's attitudes and assumptions?
Well, I think a big part of it is moving away from this idea that it's either marriage or nothing.
Right.
Like, we need to broaden our definition of what a good life looks like and stop telling people that they're somehow incomplete if they're not married.
Because they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, I know so many amazing single people who are living these, incredible lives.
I too.
Doing their own thing, building careers, traveling the world, making a difference. It's like they're not waiting for anything. They're already living their best lives.
Exactly. And their stories are important. We need to hear them. We need to move away from these old stereotypes of the lonely single person or the desperate spinster.
Yeah.
Like, those are just harmful. And they reinforce this idea that single people are somehow less than.
Yeah. It's like that book, All the Single Ladies, by Rebecca Traister.
Oh, yeah. I love that book.
She really challenges those old-fashioned ideas,
Yeah.
She talks about how strong and independent single women are.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that every person has value no matter what their relationship status is.
Right.
Being single isn't a failure. It's a choice. And it's a valid choice.
It's like, imagine you go to this party and everyone's playing this big board game.
Okay.
And the game is called Life, right? And the goal of the game is to get married and have kids.
Mm-hmm.
But you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute. What if I want to play a different game,
Yeah.
Like, what if my idea of winning is totally different?
That's such a good analogy. It really highlights the fact that there are so many different ways to be happy.
Right.
And no one way is the right way.
Yeah. So it's not about saying that marriage is bad.
No, not at all.
It's about saying, hey, we can have all these different games on the table, and everyone can choose the one that they want to play.
Right.
And we can all celebrate each other's wins.
Exactly. It's about creating a world where everyone feels like they belong, where we celebrate diversity,
Yeah,
It's a beautiful vision.
it is. This whole conversation has really made me think about how much these biases are all around us.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Like, they're so ingrained that sometimes we don't even notice them.
It's true. But, once you start to see them, you can't unsee them. And that's the first step towards change.
And, speaking of seeing things differently,
Yeah.
I remember we talked about Professor Eliakim Kislev before.
Yeah.
He's doing some really cool research on, like, how to measure the impact of policies on single people.
Yeah. And his work is so important because it gives us real data that we can use to advocate for change.
Right. It's not just anecdotal anymore.
Exactly. It's like we can actually see the problem in black and white.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into single equality,
Yeah.
what are some, like, key takeaways for our listeners? Like, what should they be thinking about no matter what their relationship status is?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to recognize that this idea of marital supremacy exists. And to start noticing how it shows up in our lives.
Right.
Even if it doesn't directly affect you, just being aware of it can help you be a better ally.
It's about paying attention to those little things.
Yeah, right?
Right?
Okay.
Like when you're filling out a form online and it automatically defaults to married.
Yeah.
Or you go to a social event and it seems like it's designed for couples.
Right.
It's about noticing those little cues and asking yourself, is everyone being included here?
Am I part of the problem?
Yeah.
Am I accidentally excluding someone?
Am I perpetuating a system that disadvantages certain groups?
Yeah, exactly.
And then the second thing is to keep talking about it.
Yes.
Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues about these issues. Share what you've learned.
Absolutely.
Advocate for policies that promote single equality,
It's about, using your voice to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing is that we should all just try to be more open-minded about different ways of life.
Yeah.
Like, let's celebrate the fact that people choose different paths.
Right.
Some people choose singlehood, some people choose marriage, some people choose something else entirely.
Right.
Let's just create a world where everyone feels like they can be themselves and be happy.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like we started this conversation talking about marital supremacy.
Right.
But it's really become this bigger conversation about, freedom of choice and like you said, the right to define your own life.
It really has. It's about breaking free from all these societal expectations.
Yeah.
All these rules about how we should live and who we should be and what happiness should look like.
It's like sometimes those rules are so ingrained in us that we don't even realize we're following them.
Right.
It takes a lot of work to step back and ask yourself, is this really what I want?
Or am I just living someone else's life?
Exactly.
That's such a powerful question. And I think it applies to all areas of life, not just relationships.
Right.
It's about questioning everything, challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
And creating a world where everyone has the power to write their own story.
I love that, writing our own stories. So I want to leave our listeners with this thought. What does your story look like?
Oh, that's good.
What brings you joy?
Yeah.
What does your ideal life look like? Regardless of what anyone else tells you.
That's a great question for everyone to think about. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into single equality.
It was my pleasure.
We'll be back next time with another interesting topic, so be sure to tune in.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
And until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep writing your own story.